Welcome to Expat Hoops, where we talk to basketball players who have played their pro careers outside of the U.S. Today, we talk to Bronx, New York native Brandon Hill. He has experiences across the world similar to a lot of our guests, but is also very different. In his overseas career, he's been playing in leagues in 12 different countries, like China, Australia, and Abu Dhabi.
Before we get into it with Brandon, though, we wanted to remind you that we have a new permanent home, our website, expathoops.com. You can still find us on our YouTube channel for all our audio podcasts. You can find us on outlets like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. But now let's get into it with our guest today as he joins us today from Armenia. Welcome to the pod, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
We've been looking forward to sitting down with you for a little while now. Take us through or take us through our viewers and listeners a little bit about you in terms of from the college game, what your college experience was before you became a professional.
Okay. So I actually finished high school early, 2007. I took my talents first to a junior college in West Virginia called Potomac State. Some things didn't work out there for me the way I wanted them to, so I ended up transferring schools to a school called ASA that's in Brooklyn, New York. Ended up playing there for a couple of months before having a season-ending injury. Rehab myself to health and had an opportunity where I met someone who kind of directed me into the overseas avenue, was able to connect with him and do some things and ended up getting my first job out of that, the end of 2008 going into 2009.
So that's actually the really interesting aspect. We were talking a little bit off the pod about when you were in school and necessarily hadn't considered playing overseas, and tell us through like what that conversation was like, how that came to be, and when you really kind of started to think, wait a minute, what's this all about, that I can get paid to play professional basketball, and how that all came to be that you wound up going to your first overseas job.
Well, basically what ended up happening was when I got to ASA, I actually played much better as far as come on the court than I did when I was at Potomac State. My issue at Potomac State was more about the coaching than actual play on the floor. But I had a little bit more freedom at ASA, so the numbers reflected the freedom. So then I had a gentleman approach me and was just like, hey, man, I know you got some decisions to make as far as what you're going to do next, especially after having the injury and, everybody kind of wondering what was my next step was going to be. I didn't even know at that point in time because I'm like, this was breaking an ankle. This is not something you just kind of jump back up and keep going at. So he ended up having a conversation with me and he said, I know that you have some things going on with your family back home. I know you want to make some changes that can help them as well as yourself. So did you ever think about going overseas? And when he said that to me, I'm like, I don't even really know much about overseas. So we ended up sitting down, having a real intense conversation about, what is the expected financially, what would be the benefit, as far as my career, what would be the benefit. We kind of laid out a framework of a plan of this is what we're going to do. You go over here, and if you're able to perform well for a year or two, you can always come back and try the NBA because, everybody's goal when you're young trying to come up is make it to the highest level. So the NBA was the goal. So once we laid that plan out, I was all on board, had a conversation with my family. They was on board, and I ended up taking that trip over, and here I am still.
And so who was that person that, we talked a little bit off the pod, who that person was in terms of what their relationship to overseas basketball and why were they able to kind of piece it together and talk the plan out to you, and what were you basically able to learn from them based off of their experiences overseas?
Oh, so his name was Jimmy. I'm be honest with you, I don't know his last name because we never even got that far into it, but he was a friend of the assistant coach at ASA. Crazy enough, I come to find out later on that one of the guys that I look up to is like a mentor. He's like my big brother that played overseas for a long time. They were really close friends. His name is Corey Williams. He actually is a color commentary guy in Australia right now, but he played for 16 years overseas before he decided to do that. So just knowing how close he was to our assistant coach, who was like, one of my mentors, which he was the reason I actually went to ASA. Knowing how close he was and how much he respected him, whatever he said, I took it as gold and was like, you know what, if this guy says I can do it and he has the connections to get me there, then I'll take the trip and just kind of hope things work out from there. Because once he sent me over, it was like all I had to do was worry about what I needed to do on the court. Nothing else mattered. So, yeah, that's what it was about for me.
And so once you turn pro, you've had a number of pretty unique experiences. You played in a lot of places that we haven't talked to many guests about, including your first stint, which you had in Dubai, which you started in 2008. What was it like playing in Dubai? What was the experience like on the court? And what sorts of perks did you have off the court?
It was interesting at first. It took a lot of time to just adjust to the country itself. There was a lot of differences from what we are used to in America and then going over there. I wasn't, going out or anything like that. I was too young to do those type of things. So really my downtime was spent eating, going to malls, and then trying to visit landmarks and things like that. So I was doing stuff that I probably would have never imagined myself doing, riding a camel. I did skydiving a few times, swimming with sharks. I didn't even know how to swim. So I had to try to learn some of that on the fly to try to do that stuff. But off the court was amazing. It just got to a point where after maybe a month, all of the stuff off the court, you do it so many times that it's like, all right, there's nothing else really to do. So after that was strictly focused on the court. But on the court, it was great too, because a lot of the other imports were seasoned vets. Some were guys that were in the NBA for a long time that were getting hundreds of thousands of dollars to play in Dubai because they had the type of resources to pay those guys. So, playing former NBA players was great. Me being one of the only guards in the league at that time as a pro, because they didn't usually bring in guards. They usually brought in only power forwards and centers because most of the locals were guards. So they didn't want to sit their locals down to bring in import players. But me being one of the few guards, it actually set me up well because I'm just going out there competing against these guys. And if I look good playing against these NBA guys or former NBA guys, and that helps my resume, or at least we thought so at the time, it helped my resume. So I was excited about that. So every day was food, gym, let's go to the mall and do something fun, back to the same thing again and again. And it made the transition easy after a little while. So it was great.
So you went to Spain and Italy after that, which are pretty high level leagues. Did it help your resume being in Dubai to get to those places?
No. So actually what ended up happening was after Dubai, when I went to Spain, I had to drop. Dubai only has one level. It's just, this is the top. When I went to Spain, I had to drop to the third level because of the fact that they didn't respect that Middle Eastern section, because outside of the NBA guys, they didn't consider the locals high level players. So because of that, it was like, all right, well, you just went somewhere and had fun, because again, it wasn't a lot of other import guards there. It was more bigs. So 50% of the games I was playing against a local guard. So of course they expect you to have 30 against a local guard. And then if you're playing somebody else from the States, you have to turn it up again even more. So when I went to Spain, I had to go there and basically prove that I can play on the European level. So I met LEB Silva at the time, and I had to play like crazy in LEB Silva to actually get some respect. And then when I went to Italy, I still wasn't at top level. I was in second division when I went to Italy and still had to do the same thing. Fortunately for me, I was able to still perform well in both places, which kind of helped me keep going from there. So I was able to branch out a little bit more after that, kind of make some more stops.
And you showed up in Denmark after that. Were you in the first level in Denmark by that point?
Yes. I went to Denmark after that, played top league, had a hell of a season there that year. Unfortunately, we didn't win, but statistically for me, it was a great season for me. Ended up going from there to Lebanon, which the Lebanon connection ended up coming about because of the fact that when I was in Dubai, crazy enough, there was a tournament that they had every year that two teams from Lebanon came, a team from Egypt came, and then two teams from Iran came to play in it. And the 2 years that I was in Dubai, both years I played well. So that team kind of was on the radar for me for a while anyway. So I was able to go there, play for Home Net, man. And everything was kind of up after that. It was a beautiful stop for me. That was a blessing to get that stop there, because that probably was my best stop in the first half of my career, even better than Denmark, actually. It was probably the best stop. So I was able to kind of keep going that way and kind of stay in that range of, you're in a pretty good league. You're not, Euro League guy, but you're in a pretty good league where you're going to still get respect every time you go to a stop after this, as long as you perform. So it was healthy for me.
And just to keep, so our listeners can keep track of where we are in your career chronologically, about what year were you in Lebanon? You started in 2008 in Dubai. Where are we now?
Year 6.
Year 6? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So after Lebanon, you had a pretty good experience there. Where did you end up?
After Lebanon was Australia. I played for the Townsville Crocodiles, and that was an amazing experience, man. It felt like I was at home the whole time I was there. The fans were amazing. The country itself was nice. We got to do a lot of stuff off the court that was dope. We went to Perth, all over the place, went to Sydney, and Sydney was amazing. We just got to really travel around and experience the country. And then because it felt so similar to home, we got comfortable there and was just able to kind of have some fun. We won a lot of games that year. We came up short in the playoffs, unfortunately, but just the fact that we were able to mesh so well, everybody played at a high level, we had a good time. Can't argue with the results of that. So it was great.
So after being in Australia, I believe it was back to Denmark for the second time.
Mm-hmm. Yep, back to Denmark again.
So what, having some familiarity with Denmark, and I know that you said it was, I think your phrasing was something along the lines of Denmark was probably your close second in the first half of your career. So what kind of made it nice going back to Denmark? Was it a slightly different experience for a different team? Take us through the second time in Denmark.
So the second time was more about me wanting to go back somewhere. And then someone had a conversation with me about national team and what you could do as a person who went to a country more than one time. Once they told me about that, Denmark was the place that not only gave me an offer at that point in time for me to actually come back, one of the teams did, but because of the whole national team talk, it was like, so you're telling me if I go back here 2 more times, I can potentially play for the national team? I'll take it. So for me, that was really the driving force behind me going back there at the time was I can go here. I played well the first time I was there. So I felt comfortable going back there. I had a lot of friends in the country after playing the first time. So the transition was going to be easy. So it ended up taking me back there. And it was the second experience is probably much better than the first one overall, as far as winning and everything that was on the court and the experience that I had off the court because I got to do more things.
It's always very interesting when we have guests in the show who are Americans playing overseas and they have the opportunity to get citizenship in another nation so they can play for the national team and have that dual citizenship, which then allows them to come back into the league as a local if necessary. Tell us a little bit about that process. Did you go through with it? Did you end up playing for the National League?
So I actually did not end up playing on the national team, but I did apply for citizenship after my second year, and I was able to get it. So, being a dual passport guy helps a lot. But that is also why I ended up going back 2 more times because of that also. But it was an experience for me just to be able to walk around with 2 passports. I felt like, I was James Bond or somebody. I could switch up and be like, hey, man, I'm Danish today. It was super dope. But, at the time that I applied, I had just missed the Olympics coming back around. So it was a couple guys that played for the Bakken Bears that ended up making the team. And I didn't even get to try out because I really wanted to, but those guys got to go on and make the team and experience that. Because my whole mission for it was, if I can make the national team, even if we didn't play Team USA, just me being there, competing against all these guys from other countries, boost the resume up astronomically. Even if you played mid-tier instead of, going crazy like you would hope you would want to, just having that on your resume would look phenomenal. So that was the goal. But again, unfortunately, I didn't even get to try out because I wasn't in the country when they had the tryout. So I missed out on that. But still having the dual passports and things like that and being able to use that in Bozeman 8 countries that are in that grouping helps a lot. So it was definitely a positive thing for me to do that.
Yeah, and it helps you move around the EU too. Were you? Did you decide to do any tourism after that? After you got that passport, just as a result of the fact that it was easier?
Absolutely. I've traveled to Greece a few times just to go to see the statue of Athena because it's amazing. Just standing over and seeing everything around that, it was amazing. A couple times in Sweden. I went to Russia a few times just to check it out. Going to Moscow a few times. Even when I went to Belarus, which was last year, I actually went back to Russia to do more exploring. So it definitely being able to use that when I'm in Europe has helped. The only time that I ran into a sticky situation was one time we traveled, and when I flew out of the country, I used my American passport. And then when we were flying somewhere else, I used the Danish one. and they thought that I was trying to, do some tricky stuff. So it got me into some trouble. But the only reason that I did that was because I forgot the American one in my house. So I left and used the Danish one, and got me into some trouble. But we handled that situation. Luckily, it wasn't nothing too crazy. I just had to get like searched and stuff like that. They had to make sure I wasn't bringing contraband over. And it was okay. So it worked out for me.
You're all good.
So from that period of time, the second time in Denmark, and in addition to all your travels, you go to Belarus. I don't believe we've had anybody on the pod that's ever actually played in Belarus, to the best of my knowledge. Take us through what that experience was like, not only off the court, but in terms of what the league is like, and what the fan interaction is like, what the fan experience is like.
Okay, so Belarus was actually not a place that was on my list to go. What ended up happening was a friend of mine, she played in Belarus and she was already there. I was in the process of trying to find a place to go for that season because it was coming off COVID time. It was like right in the heart of COVID. So she was talking to me and she was like, well, I mean, we have a men's team here. You should come check us out. I can send your resume to the coaches over there and see what they say. So she ended up doing that. And they reached out to me and said they wanted me to come in. So I was on the first thing smoking. It actually was one of the most interesting stops I had because the team that was at the top is called Smoky Minsk. Smoky has basically Champions League connections because they were in their first year playing in Champions League when I got there. So, that's an automatic resume boost for anybody that's coming through because it brings the whole league up to have somebody at that level in your group. So the fact that they was there and playing against those guys, it actually made it interesting because the teams at the top were really good. You really had to tie your shoes up and be ready to play against those guys when it was time. But then the bottom half teams was like a bunch of young players that were trying to figure out what was going on with coaches that maybe just wanted to do it because they enjoyed coaching and not because they necessarily studied the game. So you'll have a game where you're playing where you might win by 30, and then you have another game that you're playing that's going down to the wire, and it comes down to who makes the last shot. So it made the season very interesting, and the preparation for the games very interesting because our coach was he was lax with the easy teams and very, very tough with the harder teams. So practices would be so crazy that, we would have days where guys get really frustrated because they're like, man, last time we had practice, we was just jogging around doing a shoot around the whole practice before the game. Now you running us into the floor because tomorrow we play Smoky. It was, it was a lot of moving around, but it was definitely one of the most interesting stops I had. But I enjoyed it though. I enjoyed it a lot.
And what was the reception like from fans there in terms of, what's the appreciation level for basketball? Are there, low crowds, mid crowds, high crowds, the fan intensity? What's the experience like? American crowds are usually pretty engaged in a game, but also, you can go to some places like Greece where it's just like, whoa, or Cyprus or something like that. So what's the Belarusian fan experience like over there?
So they are actually extremely engaged. It really depends more though on who you playing as far as how many fans come out and how crazy it gets. You'll have one game where you maybe have a couple of people that have family on the court, or they might be a fan of a certain player. They'll come check you out. It's a nice game. It's not too loud, too crazy. And then you have another game where they have the flags and people bringing drums and beating on drums and yelling at you every time that you come down the court. And we had a situation one time where a guy threw a water bottle on the court from the opposing he was a fan of the opposing team. And he was like, I'm going to let you guys know that I do not want you to win. And he was going crazy the whole game. So it really just depended on who you were playing. I can say that when Smokey played, because they were a Champions League team, there were teams from other places, from other countries coming to play in Belarus. So like, for example, there's a team in Greece called AEK. When AEK would come to Belarus and play Smokey, it was madness. It was madness. The arena was packed, flags, drums, fireworks, everything that you could imagine happening in the gym was happening for that game because they wanted them to beat a Greek team. But then, it might be another game where somebody would come and it's like 100 people in the gym in a 5,000 seat arena. It's 100 people in there just happy to come and watch a game. So they were extremely engaged, but it really depended on who was playing.
I'm also curious of your off the court experience in Belarus, because I know that Belarus is a place that is it's ruled by an iron fist by their leader. So
yeah,
what was that like for you living in that kind of environment?
really, it probably was the quietest stop I made because you really weren't doing much. Your days were the gym, figuring out what you were going to eat, maybe go to a movie one time. They had a big mall that was in the middle of the city in Minsk. You could go there and check some stuff out. That was really it. Like you weren't doing too much off the court there because it really wasn't too much to do. So you couldn't do anything but tunnel vision on basketball, which made the competition as far as overall competition good. But at the same time, if you were one of those people that you enjoy going somewhere and exploring the country and kind of getting a feel for that, Belarus might not be the stop, especially because the toughest part was the weather. Oh man, we're talking about cold, snowy blizzards all each season. That was Belarus. The whole time I was there, it was snowing or raining. It was -5 degrees. Like it was crazy. So yeah, if you prepare for if you would just want to kind of tune everything out and just focus on the gym, Belarus is a great stop. But if you're looking for exploring and going sightseeing, seeing landmarks and stuff like that, I wouldn't recommend that anywhere at any time.
So that basically brings us to your current stop. You're in Armenia right now. You're in, are you in Yerevan? Are you in the capital?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. So you're with FEMA BC, but you are not just a player. You are a team owner, which is a very unique situation. We have not had anyone on the podcast that's been an overseas team owner. We've had a previous guest that owned a couple of pro and semi-pro teams here in the United States, but no one's owned a team overseas, a professional team. So first of all, tell us how you came into ownership of this team. We'll talk a little bit about the overall structure of some of the other things that you've gotten into on our extras. But right now, focus on FEMA BC, how you got into ownership with them and how things have been going.
Okay. So I came to Armenia actually to play for a team called Urartu. I signed over the summer in August, and we arrived in Armenia at the end of September. We had a preseason tournament that was basically Armenia using its connections that they have with different agencies to have the guys that have already signed contracts play against guys who are trying to get a contract. And then from there, they decide who they want to keep and who they don't want to keep. This is something that we didn't know before we got here, but that's what we ended up finding out later on. So I played with UR2 during the preseason. We ended up having a situation where the amount of money that they were talking about prior to me coming and the amount of money that they were looking to give me after the preseason didn't match. So I wasn't happy about that. I ended up leaving and asking to be released from that to go play for a team called Erebuni here. I was with Erebuni from October 5th to November 26th. I hurt my hip while I was here during a practice with Erebuni, so I was out for most of the time. I think I only played 2 games with them before the release happened. But basically what ended up happening is me and the owner did not get along. We did not have pleasant conversations. What ended up happening was he basically said, because I'm an older guy now, that he didn't want to keep me on the team because he felt like with me being injured, it was going to take me longer to recover than somebody who was younger than me. So he didn't want me on the team no more. So we agreed to part ways. And at that time, when we agreed to part ways, I was actually going to go back home and figure out what my next stop was going to be. I ended up having a conversation with one of the directors of the league. They had just had the owner of FEMA at the time say he didn't even want to do anything with the team no more. Like they couldn't get this guy because he was a guy that was from another country that they were trying to keep in tune with everything, but he wasn't handling business the right way and stuff like that. So what ended up happening was he said, hey, you're a veteran. Have you ever thought about actually doing team ownership? Because he felt like me coming on as an owner would be good. He just didn't know if I was prepared to do something like that. Immediately when he talked about that, my mind went straight to, I know so many players in the US right now that are looking for an opportunity. I know a gazillion players in Canada right now that are looking for opportunities. So I ended up being like, I could use FEMA as a pipeline to just give guys opportunities to come out and play and start their careers. So I ended up agreeing to it. And I officially did all the paperwork and stuff like that to take over the team November 27th. And here I am,
So
using it to give the jobs.
So you're basically a full owner of the team, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you're basically, I don't want to say you're running day-to-day operations, but I mean, you're the guy who's in charge of the team. Do you do any general management or anything like that to the team? I know you said you're bringing players over and stuff. You do everything.
I was going to say, I do everything.
You're the chief bottle washer. You're bringing the players over. You're signing the checks. You're unlocking people's houses as you
yes.
so unceremoniously had to do before you came on the podcast. I thought I'd bring that up. The life of an owner in Armenia.
Yes, I was going to say, if I could turn the camera right now to the side, all of the uniforms are literally right here next to me, laid out on the chair. But
we'll do that in the extras.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. But it was. I'm actually truly blessed, and I'm glad that I was able to get that opportunity, because I didn't know if I would have the time and the understanding to do something like this until I actually did it. And now that I've done it, I've realized that it's not as crazy as far as the process as I thought it was. It's very time consuming. I will say that it is very time consuming to own a team and play on the team, because you have to focus on getting better every day to stay at a level that you need to for your team to win. But then also having conversations with a bunch of different players that want to come over, talking to your coach and trying to get on the same page with him as an owner and a player, because it's two different conversations that you have to have. Once you get a player over here, you got to make sure all of their stuff is taken care of, while still trying to make sure your stuff is taken care of. And you're talking about 4 other guys that you have to do that with, while also worrying about yourself. It is very, very time consuming. Meeting sponsors and having conversations with them to try to get them to be a part of it, and explaining what your baseline is and what you're doing. You got to keep up with social media, because social media is so big now. So all the different social media aspects that come along with it, you got to keep up with all of those things. So my days are a revolving door and cycle of the same stuff every day, just at different times. So free time is not a thing right now. But I also made it that way on purpose, because I didn't want to start delegating and trying to hire people to do things under me until I understood everything that I needed to understand about what goes into it. And then I can start bringing people on, because then it's easier to delegate. This is what I need you to do. Come up with a proper budget based on all the stuff that they have to do, stuff like that. So it's definitely been a time-consuming thing, but it's been a blessing at the same time.
We'll probably get into a lot of the stuff in terms of the not only what you're doing with this team, as we talked off the pod. There's a couple other teams that you're in the process of differing process of where you're actually owning. So you're actually a multiple team owner, but with this one in particular, we'll get into like sponsors and the day-to-day and everything like that. But one of the interesting things that Tony and I talked about off the pod before you even got on was Armenia is a beautiful country. You've never played there before, and you're now an owner, and like you said, you've made yourself very busy. But at the same time, during these road trips and things like that, you get to see a little bit about the country. Is that something that, at least as of right now, that you have? I don't know if I would want to say a little bit of regret, but maybe you're storing something away, saying, you know what, now that I own a team here, I've got some establishment. There are some places that I definitely want to come back to, like when I have a little bit more free time.
Absolutely. So when we were here during the preseason, we got to check out a few of the landmarks here. Most of the places are like churches and monasteries and stuff like that. So we actually went to Garni. We went to see one of the monasteries that's on a mountain that, people drink the holy water that's falling through the cracks, and the prayer rooms and stuff like that. So I've gotten to see a few things, but like there's a ski resort here I still haven't been to yet that I really want to check out. There's like a big church that was like the first church that they built here when they officially became the first country to adopt Christianity. That's like maybe 2 hours out. I still haven't been there yet, and I want to check it out. But it's a few different places that I'm looking forward to after the season is over, going to check out and kind of catch up on. Because right now, even if I did have the free time, right now it would be difficult to do because it is cold here right now. So you wouldn't get to experience it and enjoy it the same. but definitely after the season, I'm going to go check some of those places out because I actually enjoy Armenia. It's quiet. It's not too much madness. You know, there's a lot of great food here, and Cascade is a phenomenal place that's there with a lot of different food. So I've actually enjoyed the transition here for the most part. The only thing it's been is getting used to the weather, but I was in Belarus, so it's cold, but it ain't that cold. So, you know, it's been great outside of that.
It's already a win because it's not Belarus in terms of the cold, not the country, just the cold.
That is a cold that I hope I never have to experience again unless I absolutely have to. But if I do, I'm fully prepared for what I need to bring to be good there from now on. But yeah, I love Armenia. It's great here.
Well, Brandon, thank you very much for joining us today from Armenia and telling you about your unique experiences, which we're not done talking with yet. We're going to have some extras that we're going to keep talking to you about, especially about your ownership of not just this team you're in on Armenia, but 2 other teams that you have, which you can find on YouTube as you're listening to us. And a reminder also, you can find us on expathoops.com and anywhere you get your favorite podcast. Thank you for joining us today, Brandon Hill.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.